Perfect. So we are answering the question of what does a trauma-informed organization look like to you? And we would love to have you introduce yourself in the chat. If you'll just make sure to click the default as the hosts and panelists. And so we get to see all these amazing information, but we would love to have everyone be able to see the thoughts. So if you'll click to everyone before putting that in there, that would be great. My name is Angie Burleson. I am the executive director for the Arizona ACEs Consortium, and I'm joined here with Claire Luge of Prevent Child Abuse Arizona. We have partnered to bring you these webinars on different aspects of being trauma informed. And so we're really thankful that you are here for our journey of a trauma informed organization. Claire, do you have anything to add?
You did it well, Angie, as usual, but hi everyone, I'm Claire Luge with Prevent Child Abuse Arizona. This is part of a series of 4 that we have done together, leading up to next month's ACEs Summit, which is happening December 14th through the 16th. If you want to see previous recordings of the webinars that we have done for the past 3 months, we focused on different aspects of applying the trauma-informed approach, and they can be found on the ACEs Consortium website, as well as registration for that summit happening December 14th through the 16th. So with that, I'll pass it back to you, Angie, to introduce our panel.
Thank you. And of course, we have emergency vehicles driving by just as we start here, and putting in the chat the links to the webinar page that has the recordings on it. And this is also being recorded and will be posted there. Also, that's azaces.org/webinars. And then to our ACEs Summit. Thank you, Claire, for reminding me at the azaces.org/summit 2021. Well, we are super excited to have Hope Women's Center come here and discuss of what it was like to be a trauma-informed organization, right? Hope, I'm going to read a little introduction about them. Hope Women's Center has been meeting the holistic needs of women and teen girls in poverty, crisis, and abuse since 1984. In the past decade, they've expanded to 6 locations and a maternity home, with centers in Phoenix, Apache Junction, Coolidge, West Valley, Maricopa, and Camp Verde. Hope offers trauma-informed services such as life skills classes, job training, pregnancy and postpartum support, parenting classes, mentoring, support groups, and crisis counseling. All services are free, and participation accrues points for material resources or utility assistance. In 2020, Hope provided over 49,000, you heard that right, 49,000 opportunities to help and hope to 1,100 women and their families. And I am going to stop sharing now and turn it over and let everyone do their introductions.
Thank you. We are happy to be here. I'm going to close down. I have the chat up so I want to be able to see us. So my name is Tammy Abernathy. I'm the CEO of Hope Women's Center. With me, I have Tiffany Delhousse.
I'm the center manager of our Phoenix location. As you mentioned, there's 6 locations, and I'm at the Phoenix location.
And then we have Sylvia Escobar, who's one of our beloved clients.
Oh, you're so sweet.
Here at the Phoenix location. So the journey to becoming trauma informed, it's been a privilege for us to be on it. It's something that we started the process in 2018 as we really were beginning to see, we had seen it all along, the trauma that many of our clients were coming in and struggling with, the ongoing abuse and grief and loss and so many different things that they were dealing with, and just wanting to be able to serve them in a more impactful way, in a way that brought help, that in a way that didn't re-trigger or traumatize them. So we wanted to understand what makes up trauma, to really have a deeper understanding of trauma and how to apply that and how we served our clients. So we started the journey in 2018 was our first, I think 17, actually the fall was our first training, where we've now had 8 trainings. And initially there were some immediate things that we learned in the way that we approach things with our paperwork, and the way that we really began to understand our clients and better serve them as they would come in, often in a highly traumatized state, and how we could really come alongside and support them and use language like someone had already put in the chat, instead of what's wrong with you, just what happened, and coming alongside and really giving them time and understanding how to help someone take deep breaths and feel safe. Safety became one of our core things as an organization that made sure all of our centers, as a woman walked in, would feel safe. That was one of the, and that is one of the primary things that women will say now when we say, how has Hope Women's Center impacted you? They talk a lot about that feeling of safety. So that was huge for us. So really meeting it and our clients' needs was just a natural. It was something we already had the programs and the services, and we wanted to learn more about how to do that from a trauma-informed way. But in that process, we realized that really this went so much deeper than just in the way that we served our clients. So being trauma informed had to become a part of our culture as an organization. It had to be incorporated into every level, from the executive management all the way down to our direct care staff, and all the way down to where our clients really felt it. It needed to be so much a part of the culture that it just incorporated, or just kind of went across everything that we do. So more than just training, which was extensive, it really became a very intentional thing about how do we incorporate it into our culture? How do we take care of our volunteers? How do we take care of our staff in a trauma-informed way? How do we help them understand trauma, secondary trauma, which we realized was impacting a lot of us without having understood that in the past? And how do we address that? How do we really come alongside as a team? How do we create unity? And how together as volunteers, staff members, and the women that we serve, how do we create this safe environment? So one of the most pivotal things we did in that was hiring a trauma-informed care coordinator. And I'm sad she's not on the call. She was supposed to be, but her daughter went into labor today. So understandably, in a trauma-informed way, we sent her to be with her daughter. But really having someone that was looking at this intentionally, how are these practices, how are we taking what we're learning in our training, and how are we applying it as we work with our clients directly, as we work with our staff, as we work with our volunteers, really being intentional in creating tools and resources and keeping the trauma-informed care principles in front of us. I mean, that was, I think as a leader, that was pivotal for us to have someone that was one of their primary responsibilities, was really bringing that awareness about. So I definitely have more to share on how we've incorporated that into our everyday, but I want Tiffany to share a little bit from how we've done it with our volunteers and some of our client practices.
So as an organization, we're 90% volunteer run. So our volunteers are really what kind of put the hands and feet to what we do here. So a lot of that is helping them recognize when there is something, especially our mentors who are in appointment after appointment, hearing some really hard things. And so how are they identifying, even in touch with themselves, that, like Tammy mentioned, that secondary trauma or that compassion fatigue? How are they able to cue in on when a woman is in trauma? So what are some signs that we're looking for of, some things, eye contact, or what's going on with her body language, that we can be extra sensitive? And someone mentioned in the chat, just treating everybody as if they are. And I think just starting off with that, like you can't go wrong with just a spirit of having a trauma-informed approach. So we spent a lot of time working with our volunteers on identifying their own, and like Tammy mentioned, triggers. What are some key things they can know, and what can they do about it? And then how do we approach the women that walk through the door? I met a lot of people also mentioned safety and empowerment, and just giving them value and worth no matter what the situation is, because when you already have trauma, adding and more shame or more stress to the situation, it's just going to escalate that. So being really extra sensitive to all the layers that come with someone in trauma.
Absolutely. And then we wanted Sylvia to share a little bit. Sylvia's been with us a number of years, just really a huge part of our center here, but also has just had some tough things she's experienced and gone through some trauma, and how being a trauma-informed organization has impacted you.
Sure. So one of the things that it has really done, Hope Center, for me is, like everyone put in the chat, it really was so important for me to feel safe at the Hope Center, but also that they're able to hear what the trauma is going on. So for example, for me, I lost my husband unexpectedly in 2017, and then being compassionate and helping through that process of grief and understanding that this was such a hard thing to deal with, and generally caring and listening to what we were dealing with. It's a blessing. It really is a blessing. It's hard to deal with grief, but knowing that there's a safe place that you can come to, and their family, and they're, like I said, they're really showing that love to us of caring, listening, understanding, encouraging us, empowering us, saying, you know what, we're here for you. Such a big support system for us. I mean, it's incredible. I also, after my husband passed away 2 years later, I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer and an autoimmune. And it was so difficult. And having my mentor, just give me tools and how to cope with this, that I'm dealing with this sickness now. And it's that has kind of become part of my life. And it's traumatizing, but knowing that I have this group of women that love and care for me, and the volunteers are always just, oh my gosh, there's no words to express just how loving and caring they are, and compassionate and kind, and they're willing to listen, and they genuinely care. It's not just, like they're just here. They call you and they ask you, how are things going? They follow up. I mean, that is so important as you're dealing with trauma. And I'm sorry, it's hard to talk about it because I'm still healing from it. But knowing that I have this center, that it generally is what it, its name really is what it is to me. It's hope that they can help me get through it, and they're gonna be there for me.
Beautiful, thank you.
It does cry.
Sorry, I know, sorry.
Very trauma-informed.
I think what I love what you hit on, Sylvia, with relationships. And I think that has been key for us in being trauma informed, is understanding just a deeper relationship. And really one of our core principles at Hope is meeting a woman exactly where she's at and walking with her. And that also ties into trauma informed care and that trust and transparency. We're very transparent. We want our clients to know that they're safe to be transparent, and that builds that trust. And then just the respect and the mutuality. We're not here to tell someone what to do. We want to walk with them. We want to encourage them. We want to offer them tools and supports, but we want to empower them with the gifts and the talents and all of the things that they already possess, and that oftentimes that just their experiences can cloud. So it's really getting the privilege of walking alongside someone like Sylvia through these hard things, but being able to just continue to point out strengths, continue to point out areas of resiliency, to celebrate that when we see that. I'm always humbled and awed by the resiliency that we see on a day-to-day basis with our clients, for sure. So that's been a huge piece for us, is that relationship. Did you have anything else?
Very true. No, I think Tammy just mentioning the concept of, like, we don't have a mentality with an agenda to come in and fix the problems or tell our ladies what to do. We're not in their shoes. And so really just being a support and letting them know, here's 7 or 8 amazing options, and look at what you've done, look at what you've been through. And so here's some other healthy choices, and walking along and empowering them to make those, rather than coming in with an agenda and saying, this is what you need to do, X, Y, and Z, because sometimes that's not our opinion. We're not in our shoes. There's lots of layers that we can't see.
And I think when we look at the 5 principles of trauma-informed care, we know we're creating an environment of safety, one of the trust and transparency, one of choice. Really, we're not here, again, we're not here to direct the women that we serve what to do. We're here to help them see their choices, not even offering them choices, but helping them identify and see their choices, to really point them towards hope, and to help restore dignity to them, to help them see that. And then the respect and the mutuality, and then the empowerment, knowing that the growth for her happens when she is empowered to make those choices and to recognize her strengths. So very holistic. Hope has always been very holistic, but becoming trauma informed for us was just another part of that holistic care, as we were able to support her physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Also, one of the things that has been really helpful in having Michelle and having her as our trauma-informed care coordinator for our team is creating tools. And I'm just gonna I'm sorry, I don't have these on a PowerPoint and you probably can't see them, but even just something as simple as, and this is what she created, trauma-informed care means. And so we make this accessible to every volunteer that we train, to every staff that we have. What does trauma-informed care mean at Hope Women's Center? And then we go through just some basic principles. It means we ask what happened instead of what's wrong with you. It means that we create culturally, emotionally, and physically safe spaces. And we're aware of when a client shows signs of discomfort or anxiety. It means we're transparent and we inform our clients the best that we can of what she can expect of her policy, of our policy, our processes, and our programs. If we don't know something, we say we don't know that, but we're going to find out and get back to you. We're very open and honest with what we can and can't do. It means we build those trusting relationships. It means we honor her and point her towards hope, and encourage her. So even just little tools like this was huge, because I know many of you are run organizations or part of organizations, and we're always onboarding new volunteers and new staff. So having this be a part of our culture, but also having this be something that we're regularly reminding ourselves and our volunteers and staff is huge. And so having that person that's dedicated to that, every staff meeting, we bring all 6 of our teams together once a month. Every staff meeting, our trauma-informed coordinator, Michelle, has time at that staff meeting to talk about, here's a trauma-informed care, thought for the month or tip for the month, or how have you seen it working in your center? So it's not just we had a training 2 months ago, kind of one and done, but this is a part of our communication as a team. It's a part of what we are always talking about and processing together. So we've been talking a lot. I would love to answer questions. If people have questions, I definitely can share more about how we do that as a staff and how we do with each other, how we do that. But is there time, Angie and Claire, that you want us to open up for questions, and then we can circle back to some of this at the end?
You feel free to do what works best for you. If you'd like to do questions, I think one of the questions, I haven't seen any come in the chat. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat or put them in the Q&A. We're watching both of them. One of the questions that I have specifically though is, what did your training look like? So in that initial training phase for, your staff, what did that look like for you?
So we're now up to 8. It is actually an intentional part of our training that we use a trauma-informed care specialist. We're part of the Arizona Trauma-Informed Faith Network. We are a faith-based organization. So we use one of the leaders of that organization, Sang-Hoon Yu, that comes in and trains with us. And now that we have our own trauma-informed care coordinator, they do joint trainings, but we've covered everything from the very basics of what is trauma, what does trauma-informed care look like, how do we apply it with our clients, to how do we apply it to ourselves, how do we understand self-care, and how do we understand trauma in our culture, how do we understand when we see it generationally. We've just covered we have run the gamut, and yet we continue to circle back, because you can train and train and train, but there are so many things that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. It's really important to keep circling back. So we intentionally set aside at least 2. We train, like I said, monthly, but at least 2 out of every 9 to 12 are focused solely on trauma-informed care, and just reminding us of the basic principles, very practical tools to apply, whether we're working with our clients or whether we're working just with one another on a team. There is always conflict that arises even in teams, and really using these same principles: trust and transparency, safety, acknowledging empowerment and growth, acknowledging choice. Those are things that we do with each other as team members, and as staff and volunteers as well. So that's been huge. One of the things that Michelle helped us implement is just, we do touch bases with each other on a regular basis. We use a program that allows us internally to have just instant communication with each other. And so it's really important for us to celebrate wins, even as a staff and a team. The work that we do is hard, and we are hearing hard stories, and we want to be able to celebrate the good stories. And like Sylvia had shared, just the resiliency when we get to see that, and just some of the incredible stories of our clients, we get to be able to share that and celebrate those with each other, knowing also that every little step is a win, and being able to recognize even those smaller steps. I'm looking at Michelle's notes since she was not here to share them, but honesty with each other as a team, even the ability to ask for support, balance. We talk about a lot about balance. Part of being trauma informed is understanding self-care and secondary trauma. So making sure we care for each other, making sure that we're all imbalanced and not out of balance where then our trauma is triggered. And a lot of what we have been helping both our women to understand and us as well is what happens when we all have experienced some kind of trauma and that trauma gets triggered in a work environment or in a social environment. How do we handle that? How do we process that? And how do we support one another? So those are some of the key things that we have done as a staff. It's been interesting. The last month, we've had two staff members go through some pretty significant trauma, and both of them separately sent messages saying, to me, saying, I am so grateful we've had this training in being trauma informed, because now I have seen it not only apply in our work situation, I'm seeing it apply to my family, to my crisis. I understand what's going on so much better. I have different eyes to be able to recognize some of the trauma, and I can process it. So that was really neat to see that it's very holistic. It's not just in the setting of our work environment. It looked like there's a question.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's one of the pieces in our training. We always talk about that parallel process, that internal process and that external process. And so even while we're going through this training and we're learning about these pieces, how does this apply for ourselves? Right. And how does this apply outside of ourselves, and how important it is to have that really holistic view, right? That salutogenic model of health. Right. And how does that look? I see that you pulled up the question I was about to ask you. So go ahead if you'd like.
So just, a way to contact us or how to get trained. So our trauma informed care training is just a core part of training for all of our volunteers. And then we record our training so that when we have volunteers that on board, it's actually a key thing before they start. We want them not just to catch the 8th training on trauma informed care, but to go back and watch the first 7, because each one builds and deepens in our understanding of how to apply that across the organization. So we do have volunteer@hopewomencenter.org, which is our volunteer onboarding. That's the initial step. hopewomencenter.org is our website where you can learn more about who we are and some of the volunteer opportunities. But Tiffany, you can talk about, as a volunteer kind of onboards, what some of that looks like.
Right. Well, like Tammy mentioned, so the trainings, they're the ones that we've done, the 8, they're actually 2 hours each. So there's 16 hours of intense, wonderful training we have. And then our trauma informed care coordinator, Michelle, who's with her, hopefully a new grandbaby sometime today, she created this amazing toolkit for us. So we have this kind of library resource of our trauma informed care. It's not like we can just expel it in a one-time conversation. It's extensive, and we want to have lots of resources for our team, as we're always bringing in new volunteers, staffing changes and whatnot. So, but we love having new volunteers, but that is something that we interview for. We screen. We don't want people in who think that, again, that concept that they're going to come in and fix them and give the right answers and they're going to make everything better, because it doesn't work that way. And so having that concept of having a sensitivity to the fact that what trauma looks like, and how sometimes it's not just an isolated event, but for our women in particular, a lot of times it's years and years and years of layers of trauma. And so it's not something that it's created over decades. It's not going to be, all unwound in a couple of weeks. So like Tammy talked about, celebrating the small successes. So really getting that in the minds of our volunteers and our staff, whoever is working with our women, of just understanding that it's a process and it's a long process. And so we know within our own lives, things that we'd like for us to stick faster and habits take a while to form, or rethinking our mind to change our mindset on things takes a long time. And so really having a grace approach, being really gracious towards the women as they're making steps. And again, it's their decisions. So being really resourceful for what we have, getting our resources too. And there's a lot of conversations I have. I mean, a lot of hours of sitting across from my volunteers, making sure they're understanding what trauma informed care looks like, and if they've even had their trauma addressed, because a lot of times there's things that we've just kind of pushed down and not dealt with, and so they kind of steam up, and it's hard, we're reacting out of our old reactions. And so how can we be healthy and making sure they are, as they deal with their women, to make sure they're feeling fully cared for while they're here.
recognizing and identifying that we do carry trauma and we haven't always dealt with it was also important for us. We changed some of our application, our volunteer application, our employment application, just to be able to help identify the past trauma, to make sure that someone is healed. We never want to be in a position where we are re-traumatizing someone. So we want to make sure that they have walked the journey of healing and are in a place where they are able to serve out of that healing and not triggered and we're causing a further wounding. That was an important change for us as we went on this journey. And then also I would say an important piece has been the idea of being so trauma focused and really identifying with our clients' needs has kept us very flexible for what the needs of our program are and if we need to change them. And if something isn't working or we aren't seeing it really move women toward that journey of healing, then what do we need to change and adapt? And during the pandemic, we saw that we had a lot of women, their trauma was heightened. They were coming in with a lot of mental health struggles. So we added a Hope Heals program, which was with a licensed psychologist that was able to come in and just do some adjustment, crisis counseling, but really it's short-term solutions focused therapy where they could just meet a woman where the therapist can meet her where she's at and really help her with some therapeutic interventions. So I don't know that we would have as easily seen or identified that need. We would have seen the need, but really been able to quickly pivot and adjust a program to meet that need had we not been on this journey that we were just so attuned and sensitive to when we would see needs that we could meet in our clients. I can't, Angie, can you read the question?
Yeah. So, which is funny because it was actually a question that I was just about to ask also. Christy asks, how do you ask applicants about past trauma to see if they've been through a healing process? Are there any HR rules for or against?
So I don't have my HR expert here to answer that. We ask very generally about how we approach it. And some of this we do in a conversation with a volunteer or staff or a potential staff member. We talk about the issues our clients are coming out of and what they have experienced. And we just say, we want to equip you to be the most successful and empowered to be able to walk alongside a woman that may have experienced rape or domestic violence or assault or any number of things, loss, trafficking. And so as we are talking through wanting them to be equipped, then is when we say, we talk in a general way, but giving them the opportunity to then take that deeper with, one thing that's really important to us as an organization is making sure that so we put it back on us. We don't want you to ever be serving in a position where something that you have gone through is going to be triggered because you haven't been able to walk through the healing in that. So it usually comes out in conversation. We have some great resources. If someone we can see they are still dealing with that. A lot of times, and I know this just from coming out of domestic violence and in my own relationships in the past, there's an immediate tendency to want to help. And then there is to want to help somebody else not have to go through that. And then there is a season of healing and growth that we need to go through where we are then in a better position to help. So just trying to help somebody identify that. I would think sometimes we do get women that are really in the process still and wounded. And
I think a lot of that comes, so we do have a very thorough protocol of our volunteer onboarding. So there's initial, like Tammy gave you the email for that, just volunteerhopewomencenter.org, and it's just an initial, and then that leads into me with an interview. So, and a lot of the stuff I'm touring the volunteers and letting them know this is the center. These are the types of clients that we're serving, and this is our heart for the women, and that we love them, and this is our goals and what we're doing. And a lot of that does come out in the conversation. And there've been times over the last 10 years where by the end of the conversation, she decides she wants to be a client instead of a volunteer. She's hearing like, oh, there's mentoring services and that's what you're dealing with. Like, I've never processed that rape, or I've never processed, whatever I went through. And that's fine. Then whatever if they want to be a client, that's wonderful. We can let them be, come in and I've said that a couple of times, maybe this is the place for you to get some healing. And so that's what it evolves into. So that's in a conversation. And then there's a follow-up, there's application process and background checks and all those kinds of things. So there's lots of things, and it doesn't mean, they come in to volunteer. Sometimes they just want to get their feet wet and just come in and watch the kids or sort donations. And then eventually they start teaching. And so there's a process, but that's part of us being trauma informed, being really closely tied. I don't just say, okay, you're a volunteer, bye. So there's a lot of checking in and seeing how things are going and seeing what they're feeling. That sometimes they sat in the class, I have them shadow 2 classes before they teach. And what were your thoughts? How did the class go? And so sometimes things are brought up, and that we can kind of gauge, is this the right timing and the right place or right situation to be pouring into the women? How are you feeling about that? So that's why it's an ongoing long-term interaction with our volunteers, and just to make sure that they feel safe too.
So, and then providing them with, our therapist does some of our training as well, and just some debriefing. And we try to also give space for if a volunteer is working with a hard situation with a client and needs that space to kind of process, and or the volunteer feels triggered, how can she process that? She always has staff to process with, as well as now our therapist is available to process, not in a therapeutic session for her, but just how do we, as you're feeling triggered, how do we then continue to walk with this client? Do we need to transfer this client to a different mentor, or how do we walk through this and take care of ourselves too? Because it doesn't do us any good if we burn out all of our volunteers and we're 90% volunteers, because we haven't also recognized symptoms of burnout and trauma in our volunteers.
Oh, I love this conversation. This question is for Sylvia. Sylvia, did you access resources before going to Hope Women's Center? And if you did, what was the difference between, say, a non-trauma informed organization and accessing resources at Hope? And thank you so much for your vulnerability and openness and sharing. I think we had quite a few tears in everyone understanding that feeling that you were sharing.
Yeah, I did. There was a couple places that I had gone to that, I was informed that they were available to me, but there really hasn't been anything like this where, again, I want to repeat how just loving and caring they are. Like it makes a big difference when they generally care, or like being informed of trauma, like how they approach you. Like in a more compassionate way, in a more like, let's try to figure out how, because like Tiffany was saying, that each individual is so different. We all come from, so, like Tammy was saying, there's built up trauma. Like for me, I was also sexually molested when I was young, and I just, I let all this trauma accumulate. And then when I would come to class and they would ask me questions, and like they would help with that healing, like it was just so different than what other resources I've been to. And so here they just have so much like the mentoring, the counseling, like just so much available for us. Like Tammy was saying, just to be resilient, to persevere, to know that we have somewhere we can feel safe. And in spite of our trauma, like there's this really loving support group, emotional support group, because they care for and try to meet your needs, and because everyone's so unique, so it's a different journey for everybody. So making those things available for us just makes us, it just gives us that, like I said, encouragement and motivation, and wanting to, not be depressed because all these things are happening, but there's knowing that these people are going to be there to support you and come alongside this whole situation, that it just gives you hope, and you're like, okay, I can do this because I have people that generally care and love and are compassionate and caring, and they're gonna, the healing, like Tammy says, it's a process. I'm still here. I've been here for like, I want to say about 4 to 5 years, and things keep coming at me, and I sometimes don't know why, but I'm glad that I have this place, that it's safe, that I can come, that they love on me, that they encourage me, that they provide the tools. I mean, some of those classes, they're just like unbelievable. They have so much information. They're so rich for me to have that information. The pre-diabetic class, the classes about meditation, how to take care of myself, because I'm a single mom of 4 kids. I don't have time to take care of myself sometimes, but coming to the center reminds me, you have to make time to care for you, because you're not going to be able to give anything out if you don't feel yourself. So that's what the Hope does for me here.
Beautifully expressed.
Oh, Okay, so I just have to catch my breath again from your share. So thank you. As a single mother of 4 with my own story, right? I'm no longer single, but I was for the majority of their life. I feel that, right? I feel that. And thank you. And Tammy, it has to feel, and Tiffany, it has to feel pretty amazing to hear a client speak from her heart like that, especially because we know that going through that process, right? You talked about the long process of even with the volunteers, right? And the clients, and having your volunteers understand that it is the longer process.
Yeah.
Creating a trauma-informed organization is also the same thing, right? Is that longer process. So could you share with us why you even chose to become a trauma-informed organization and go on that journey, and then some of the pieces that you had to implement even before you started that journey? So you've mentioned some of the policies and procedures and the training, but for those of us that would look at creating a trauma-informed organizations, maybe what are some of the things that you have to pre-think before going into it?
Great question. I think one of the things that helped us is when we started the trauma-informed care journey, we are still small. We're a small organization, but we were still small enough with our staff that we made it was a whole staff decision. So it wasn't just one of us saying, okay, we're going to do this now. It was something that we talked about. I mean, we're faith-based. We talked about it. We prayed about it. We really wrestled with it. We want to be the very best that we can be to our clients. We have amazing ones. We want to be the best. We want to provide the best services. We want to be that safe place for them. So what is this going to look like? What is this going to mean from my standpoint? And then going back to our board to be able to say, if we commit to this, this is going to mean time and resources and funding, but we believe this is an essential thing that we need to better serve our clients. And so we want to start this journey, but it definitely took buy-in from our staff, and it takes that continual, and that's why we keep it so present in our conversations. It takes a continual buy-in. I was thinking when Sylvia was talking about how it takes it it has to take it from leadership all the way down to the receptionist who greets a client when she walks in the door. In a lot of respects, she is the face of our trauma-informed organization way more than Tiffany or even because that is the first experience a client is gonna come across. And is she making them feel safe? Is from the moment they walk in the door of any of our 6 locations. Do they feel safe? Do they feel cared for? A really important thing that's a part of our culture is knowing someone's name. And again, we're still small. We get to see 1,000+ women, but knowing each center, being able to know the names of the women that they're serving, there's a lot of dignity and value in being able to call somebody by their name and knowing their name and knowing their story. And I love when I get to hear, I'll be in my office. I know Tiffany, you have all these stories too. And we hear, our just direct care staff. She's greeting someone for the first time, or she's here, she's listening to someone's story, or she's seeing a client she hasn't seen in a while. I love how we have worked so hard as a team that every level of the organization really understands this and seeks to be that safe, empathetic, compassionate vehicle for women to really feel that when they walk in the door. And that's a beautiful thing.
And one of the gifts with us being predominantly volunteer run is that people are here because they love the women. They're not this, so that's been a huge gift for us. And so we love our women. And so I think Tammy talks a lot about power proximity. And so when you're with them and you're hearing stories, and you can we all come in with preconceived notions of, I would just do this or whatever the situation is. But when you're like, gosh, I held her shaking hand as she's weeping and I can't, like that, I would do the same thing or whatever those things are. So when we're close to the women and we're here because we want to be, because we love them, not because, it's something that we have to do, or it's just something to, to pay the bills or whatever that is. But we're really blessed to be able to have people that are here because they want to be. And like Tammy was saying, a lot of it so much of what our goal is just to instill value and worth. And so knowing their names, knowing their kids' name, what happened, how did his driving test go, or what's happening with this? And so following up and not just asking it to ask, but really caring. The women know, they're smart. They know when someone's putting on face. And so, but we do care. And so I think that, and instilling that in our volunteers, like we're here because we love the women and we understand what that's like to be in those situations where we just feel like we can't catch our breath. And so that's what she's coming in. She's just trying to tread water, to keep her head above water. And so how can we extend care for her in all the ways that she needs it to the best of our ability. We're not going to meet all those needs, but what can we do in this moment, in this day, to take the little bit of help get that load off of her shoulders? And so what that looks is very different. I'm sure in all the organizations that you're a part of, it's going to look different in different organizations, how that works. But just having that as the forefront of as our goal and our heart towards our women, how we're serving, and getting that instilled into our volunteers and our staff, that's our foundation, is really pivotal to trauma-informed care.
And I would love, Sylvia, I don't know how we're doing with time. You girls will have to tell us if we're getting too close, but to talk about, because we've seen this as a staff, and I know that I've heard you encourage other women. So I know you've seen it even with building community among women, but as a staff, we are constantly using those principles as we encourage and support each other. And of course, as we're encouraging and supporting our clients, but even as you, as a client that's coming, as you meet other women, as you feel the trauma-informed kind of culture of the center, I've heard you encourage and you reach out and mentor other, just on a friendship basis with other women. So talk a little bit about that community.
Yeah, because like they were talking about that there's just so many women that come into a class. Like, for example, there was a woman that shared that she was just coming from an abusive relationship, and she had to go to court, and she was just, she broke down and she started crying. And I just remember going after class and just saying, I'm here for you as a friend. And then I gave her my number, and then I said, I'll be praying for you. But yeah, like what things I've learned, I've noticed, like she was saying, like them doing the classes and the training, they're more and compassionate with their own employees and their own staff. That's what it's done to me too, because I do that with the women. I make sure that if I do see something that is taking place, or something that's so traumatic that's going on in that person's life, that I just say, you know what, can I give you a hug? And then I give them my number. And I generally love to share my story, because and in spite that maybe it'll help someone else, and just to hear their stories too, and say, you know what, we're in this together, we're not alone. It's like we're family, we care for each other, and not just like you generally care. Because I feel like I've been to places like they said we're able to distinguish whether they generally want to help us or they're not. They're just like, oh yeah, how are things going? But like they don't really want to hear it. But I hear when they do ask, is like they're taking the time to hear me. Like, look, I don't feel well. I couldn't get out of bed today because I just couldn't. And like, I'm sorry that you're, being empathetic. I'm sorry that you're feeling that way. I hope it gets better. And maybe like, just being there. It really, I feel like being there and having that safe place to run to is so important. I don't think I would be here if I didn't have the Hope Center. And they know that, because I've told them, you know what, the Hope Center makes such a big difference in my life. Like, I sometimes just want to throw the towel and give up. But you know what? I remember they're there. They generally care. They're going to help me figure it out. If I don't have money to pay my rent, maybe there's going to be a way that, something will be figured out. Or maybe there's other resources that will come up. And they're just so loving. They're there for you.
And that's just a beautiful example, Sylvia, of how the ripple effect goes all the way through that. I love when I see our clients build that community with each other, where they know they're not alone. They know they're not alone with our team, but they know they're not alone. Even hearing someone else's story, that's so powerful to go, hey, I'm not the only one that's experienced this. There's a lot of healing in that.
Yes, there is.
But you have to have an environment of trust and transparency where you feel, hey, I can share this in this class or this support group because I know it's safe. Yes. And that is where I think part of our training for our team, we talk a lot about safety with our clients. We've had clients that, have come in that haven't understood that, or maybe have used abusive language, or said something harsh to another client, and we try to immediately head that off to just talk about hope is a safe place for all. Just as we want it to be a safe place for you, it needs to be safe for everybody. So what does that look like, and why we don't allow language or certain things to be talked in a way in our classes, because we want everyone to know that this is a place of safety for them.
Yeah, this is so powerful, so powerful. We have about 7 more minutes. One of the questions that is in is, would you share those resources for healing? So some of the resources that you share, would you be able to share for us? And if anybody has any closing questions, anything that they'd like to know about their journey of becoming a trauma-informed organization, or any other pieces that you have before we finish, please put it in the chat or the Q&A.
Yeah, so, well, as far as resources for healing, so we have a really vast program. So we work a lot with moms that are involved, that have their kids in the DCS systems. We have a whole track for them. We have a whole situation for sexual trauma healing. We have a curriculum for that. We have substance abuse. So there really, grief and loss. So there really are several classes we have. So we don't have just one platform. And so some of those classes are 12 weeks long. Some of them are, 8 to 10 weeks, depending on the curriculum and what's happening in them. So it's not like a one set, but that's a lot of what's happening with our mentors. So our mentors go through extensive training before they can become a mentor. Usually they're with us for about a year as a volunteer, so they can understand the women and the culture, and they don't just jump in, and there's just a lot of training. And then there's a lot of books that we have them read that are really helpful for them to understand our client base and just what healing looks like and trauma informed, and what are some things to watch for when they're in a session. And then what are some resources? So technically we're a day resource center. We spend a lot of our time partnering with other organizations, directing women to shelters and food banks and medical legal resources. So I wish it was a one and done. This is how we heal. But again, everyone's so individual, and what that healing journey looks like and what their levels of trauma are, layers of trauma, it looks so different. And so we pull from resources, and that's a lot of our training. As we have a woman sitting in front of us, like, okay, I'm hearing X, Y, and Z. And so let's start with this. So we talk a lot about, like, here's this pie of trauma. So let's just take a sliver and just start taking one bite. And we let them, like, what's heaviest on your heart right now? Like, okay, like, what are some things that we want to do to start taking some bites of that pie? And so we're not going to tell them, but we're like, okay, so we have all these resources of classes and partner agencies and things we can address in mentoring. And that's the whole concept of, we're just going to take a bite. We're just going to take 2 bites this week, and next week let's maybe start on this slice. And so it's just so individualized to that woman and what her needs are.
And it starts so much by hearing her story. So that is that, to your point, just by really listening to her story and taking that time.
Friends, I have a question, because honestly, you make it sound easy. To do this. Yeah. And so, yes. So I kind of want to touch on that, actually. What were some of the challenges in shifting your culture to one that has the trauma-informed approaches as central to it? What challenges did you face on your journey?
We made a lot of mistakes, and just being willing, but again, being small and being flexible and building that into our team, that trust and transparency. We always say we're going to try. I think that Hope is strong on that flexibility. We're going to try this. Hey, that didn't work. Or hey, that didn't have the result we thought it was going to, or that just created a whole lot of confusion or a whole lot of, so let's adapt. So having that sense of, this is a process. This is a journey. We don't have it all figured out. We're not the experts. We know a lot of experts, and we use those, and we use those resources, but it's a journey for us, and we want to be sensitive. We want to be open and flexible to change and to really adapt. And then just being honest and transparent with each other. As we think we have a great idea. Often that's the visionary part of, I get to be the visionary, and I have this great idea, and I want to take our team in this way. And it takes some great leaders to also, as a collaborative team, to go, oh, this didn't work.
Bring that back in.
That didn't work, or what we thought we were accomplishing with this program we thought was going to help address more trauma maybe didn't. And so how do we, not being afraid to say, well, that didn't work, that crashed and burned. So how do we just refocus and as a team, always making that, how do we do that as a team, and how do we try something different? And then listening to the team and really honoring at every level, listening to our clients. We do client engagement surveys and talking to our clients, like what's working, what's not, how do you feel, what's been hard, and just really trying to engage so that we can better meet those needs and understand where we may think we have it really well. And then a client is like, that actually is not, that's not helping, that's not meeting my need. And so being able to be willing to hear and humble enough to go, oh, we thought we had a hit and that was a miss. And how do we adjust that?
Yeah, I think what Tammy was just saying, just really being students of our clients. And so a lot of our programs were developed out of like, gosh, there's a need, we're not doing that, how can we fill that? And so really kind of hearing what those needs are when we work with women who are coming out of trafficking, or trying to like getting more training in that, like how are we going to address this? And so my approach this way wasn't working. Our women with unplanned pregnancies, how can we surround her with the most support possible? And so really developing programs how we can be sensitive to what they're dealing with, rather than coming in with our preconceived notions, and really being exposed to what's going on with them, so we can be fully educated, not with just what we read out of a book, but like, no, this is her story and this is what she's feeling. And so how do we respond in a way that's most honoring to her and most beneficial in the long run, but also kind of an open hand policy. So really kind of studying the needs of what they have is how we direct a lot of our programs.
I love that, being students of your clients, being students of our clients. I've heard that the most powerful thing that we can experience is to be witnessed by someone else for who we are, and in all of it. And it sounds like you're doing that. And it sounds like that is a core, that is a core of your approach.
That goes with knowing her name and knowing her story, and
regardless of what her story is or where she comes from, like has incredible worth and value. And so we let her know that she has that.
Fantastic. Well, we are right at time. On behalf of Angie and I, we and everyone here, we deeply appreciate you doing this with us and for us, and sharing what it took to do this, and how it feels. Because it feels like I can see how it feels to have this kind of approach. I've once heard the trauma-informed approach defined as the deliberate application of compassion. And
like that's exactly what Sylvia said.
Wow. Well, maybe I heard it from you. That is so. I really appreciate your candor and your story and your heart. So, as Angie's putting it in the chat box, the recording is going to be available on the ACES Consortium website within 24 hours. It's going to load on Zoom. We're also putting right now a link to our survey, our feedback survey on this webinar. We would appreciate your feedback. It's useful to us, and it helps us to continue serving the needs of our community as our panelist talked about. That's critical in the trauma-informed approach, getting feedback and listening to you. So with that, thank you so much for all of you for attending. Thank you, especially at panelists, Hope Women's Center, for what you do for our community and for building resilience and hope in women in Arizona.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
We're seeing thank yous coming in the chat.
Yeah.
Very informative, perfect session. Gratitude for you. Gratitude.
Well, thank you for letting us share. This was good. Thank you for letting us share from our heart. I was thinking, oh, we didn't have a formal PowerPoint. We're just here.
Lost Michelle.
I personally think that that's far more impressive and much more in line with the approach that you're talking about, right? To share from the heart. It's the trauma-informed approach to me is not cerebral, or perhaps not entirely cerebral or logistic. I mean, there are, things to do, but it's about the energy of relationships. Yeah. So thanks for your candor. Okay, so with that, ladies, have a wonderful Thanksgiving with you and your whole staff and community. And we will sign off now. And everyone who's still on, have a great Thanksgiving too.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.